The sun was barely stretching its first warm lines across the savanna when the cub's life changed forever. It happened near the border where the open grasslands met the dense forest, a place few creatures fully claimed. Because danger belonged to both sides, that a lioness led her cub through the brush that morning, keeping close to the shaded tree line. She was thin, moving slowly, the bones of her ribs visible beneath her skin. The migration of larger herds had shifted early that season, leaving the plains empty, and she had been surviving on scraps and instinct. The cub, only a few weeks old, trotted behind her with blind trust. But hunger has its own predators. A lone male lion, not part of her pride, stalked them from the tall grass. In the world of lions, a strange male meant one thing: threat. To secure his future bloodline, the male would destroy any cub that wasn't his own. The lioness sensed him before she saw him. She turned, placing herself between her baby and the unseen enemy. Her growl vibrated through the ground. When the strike came, it was silent, a blur of dust, fur, and muscle. The struggle lasted seconds, but the consequences lasted forever. The male lion finally retreated, injured, limping away. The cub survived only because he was small enough to roll beneath a root as the fight unfolded. But when the dust settled and the savanna grew still, he crawled out to find his mother unmoving, breath gone, eyes fixed on a sky she would never see again. The cub pressed his tiny head against her muzzle. He nudged her cheek. He waited. Nothing. No other lions came. No pride called back. He was alone. He cried. Not the roar lions are known for, but a high, thin sound meant for a mother who wasn't there anymore. The savanna did not answer. Deeper in the forest, a troop of gorillas moved quietly through the undergrowth. Their leader, Kahiro, a massive silverback with a scar along his shoulder, stopped when the wind carried an unfamiliar CRY. It wasn't the cry of a monkey. Not a bird. Not any danger he recognized. Yet none of the troop ignored the sound, because it repeated, thin, desperate, fading a little more each time. Curiosity was not usually rewarded in the wild, but loss teaches its own kind of softness. Kahiro led the troop toward the edge of the trees where the forest opened into grassland. That is where they saw him. A lion cub, weak, unsteady, nose nudging at a still body that would never respond again. Kahiro did not rush in. The troop stayed behind him, alert. The scent of lion was never a welcome one, but the cub didn't look back at them. He simply continued pressing himself against his mother's body, trying to crawl beneath her leg the way he once did for warmth. Then his strength gave out. He collapsed beside her, making no sound, too tired even for fear. The young gorillas shifted nervously, some wanting to leave, others wanting to inspect. Predators were predators, even small ones. But Kahiro did not turn away. He approached with slow, deliberate steps until his shadow fell over the tiny lion. The cub opened his eyes, pupils dark and glassy, and for a brief moment, instinct told him hide. But there was no strength left to obey. He lay still. Kahiro lowered his head, breathed in the small creature's scent, milk, dust, and terror. The troop behind him grunted uneasily. No gorilla would ever welcome a lion, not even a dying one. Kahiro had every reason to walk away, but his eyes stayed fixed on the little body. Long ago, a season the forest barely remembered, Kahiro had lost his own newborn. He had carried her small form for hours before the troop coaxed him to let go. The ache had never fully left. Something in this cub's trembling matched the memory buried deep in his chest. Without warning, Kahiro scooped the cub with one arm against his fur-covered torso, not roughly, but firmly. The way a protector grips something fragile from the jaws of death. Gasps and startled noises rippled through the troop. The cub pressed his face into Kahiro's chest. Not because he understood, because warmth was life, and this was the only warmth left. The troop hesitated. But Kahiro had made his decision, and where a silverback led, the forest followed. Not one gorilla challenged him. They turned back into the trees. And the lion cub, born of the plains, entered the forest world as something nature never planned. The first days were confusing for everyone. The cub's instincts pushed him to growl, to grab, to bite anything near his food. The gorillas responded with startled barks and quick retreats. But Kahiro did not react. He simply watched, patient and stern, when others kept their distance. He allowed the cub to cling to the long fur on his arm as they moved. When the cub whimpered through the night, Chihiro rested his massive hand over him like a sheltering branch. The troop slowly, carefully, adjusted. The young gorillas began approaching first, poking gently, curious about the strange new playmate. The cub swatted back in clumsy attempts at wrestling. At first, the troop panicked, but Chihiro gave a deep, grounding grunt, and calm returned. The cub learned their rules. They learned his that he couldn't eat leaves as they did, but gorillas tore soft roots, chewed them, and dropped them in front of him. Females carried berries in their mouths and placed them beside him. Young gorillas brought feathers and sticks, confused but trying. Children offering gifts because children understand need better than adults. Nature made them different. Loss made them the same. Weeks passed. The cub, now named in the troop's silent understanding as Raka, grew stronger. His legs carried him farther. His balance sharpened. His playful bites gained force that startled even the boldest juveniles. There were moments the troop remembered what he truly was. When Raka crouched low at movement in the bushes. When his tail flicked with hunter's rhythm. When he leapt, not like a primate, but like a predator. Yet every evening, when shadows thickened and calls of hyenas echoed faintly across the plains, Raka returned to Chihiro's side, curling against the silverback's warm body to sleep, and Chihiro allowed it. Not because the cub was tame, but because the world had taken something from each of them, and in a quiet, wordless way, they were giving something back. But nature is patient, and one day, it reminded them, the cub they raised was growing into something the troop did not fully understand, because across the forest floor, unfamiliar eyes had begun watching the gorillas, not prey, not predators of leaves, but lions, tracing the scent of one of their own. And the cub they were searching for was no longer helpless, but he was learning who he truly was. He was learning what his body was built to do, and soon, very soon, instinct would demand choices no bond could ignore. Raka grew faster than the forest seemed able to keep up with. His paws, once clumsy and small, now landed with silent precision on moss-covered logs. His shoulders broadened, muscles forming under golden fur that caught streaks of afternoon light. His playful swats with gorilla juveniles gradually turned into powerful strikes that sent them rolling. More shocked than hurt, what once drew laughter now drew caution. The troop sensed it in subtle ways. The change in his posture, the slow circling before play, the way he stared a little longer at the dikers that passed through fallen leaves. Instinct stirred in him like an old drumbeat waking after a long sleep. But every evening, without fail, Raka curled beside Chihiro, nose pressed against the silverback's thick fur. The scent of the gorilla leader was still safety, the closest thing he remembered to a heartbeat that calmed him. To Chihiro, Raka was no longer just an outsider. He had become woven into their rhythm, a peculiar thread, but a thread nonetheless. However, the forest was changing. Whispers carried through branches, distant roars at night. The echoes of a pride expanding into new territory. Predators recognized presence long before prey understood it. The scent of lion was spreading, and it was not Raka's alone. One morning, two young gorillas playing near the edge of the forest froze, hackles raised, eyes wide. They did not call out, they did not move. They simply stared through the brush as a pair of lionesses studied them with cautious, calculating eyes. Raka, now nearly the size of a juvenile gorilla, stepped between them, not out of threat, but instinctively, the way he had seen Chihiro do countless times. The lionesses watched him back. The shape was familiar. The scent was familiar. The loyalty was not that. A low growl rumbled in Raka's throat, but it was confused, uncertain, neither friendly nor hostile. The lionesses lingered only seconds before slipping back toward the savannah, but the message lingered like smoke after flame. Raka was being found without realizing he had been lost. Not yet a call. Not yet a reunion. Just recognition. The first dispute happened days later. The gorilla juveniles wrestled by the riverside, snapping branches and rolling through mud. The same game they'd played with Raka for months. But today, Raka pinned one with force that knocked the air from his lungs. The young gorilla screeched, baring teeth, but Raka didn't release. His jaws tightened at the shoulder, close enough to break skin. Chihiro thundered forward with a warning louder than any roar the forest had heard from Raka. The lion cub released and stepped back, head low but eyes bright, not with anger, but with something primal. Awakened by the struggle, the troop was unsettled. That night, Raka kept his distance, resting several yards away instead of beside Chihiro. Not out of anger, out of confusion. He didn't understand why his body reacted before his thoughts did that he didn't understand. Why hunger now carried images of prey that were once his playmates that he didn't understand why his silence scared them. Chihiro watched him in the dim moonlight, a towering figure carved by time, and something inside the silverback ached in a way words never could express. He had always known this day would come. Love could blur nature. It could not rewrite it. The forest tested them again the next afternoon. A small antelope, weak, limping, wandered too close to the troop's feeding grounds. The juveniles paid it no mind. The females barely glanced, but Raka's body tensed, his breath sharpened. His paws lowered silently. His tail flicked left, then right. Chihiro grunted a warning, short, deep, commanding, but instinct was older than command. Raka lunged. The world erupted in chaos, birds scattering, leaves tearing as the cub slammed into the antelope with a force that showed just how much lion blood thundered in his heart. The troop shrieked and leapt back. Chihiro intervened with earth-shaking fury, striking the ground with both fists. The vibrations alone froze Raka where he stood. The antelope stumbled away, bleeding but alive. Crashing through brush, Raka stared at Chihiro, breathing fast, chest heaving, muscles trembling with instinct half fulfilled. This time, he did not approach the silverback. When night came that he sat alone at the forest edge, where the trees gave way to grassland, where he could smell others like him beyond the breeze. That he watched the troop sleep in a circle, one he was no longer part of, not rejected, not punished, just gently rearranged, the way a family adjusts when it loves something it no longer understands. Then came the moment no one expected, the moment the title of this story promises, the unthinkable. A sound cut through the morning, sharp, fierce, urgent. Hyenas, .3 of them, thin, hungry, bold, drawn by the trail of the wounded antelope from the day before. They crossed into forest territory without fear. Hunger makes fools into kings. The troop panicked. Juveniles scrambled up trees. Mothers pulled infants close. Chihiro bellowed, slamming his body against a trunk as warning. But 3 hyenas are fearless when they think their meal is frightened. They advanced, hackles raised, jaws curved into savage, confident grins. Raka had been watching from the trees. He could have stayed hidden. He could have slipped away into the grasslands. He could have let instinct choose the winning side. Instead, he moved, not toward the gorillas, toward the hyenas. He stepped between them and the troop, body low, muscles coiled, eyes narrowed with a resolve he had never needed until that moment. The hyenas hesitated. The size of the lion cub challenged their plans. But hunger remained. The first hyena lunged. Raka met it head-on. Teeth and dust exploded in a violent tangle, growls ricocheting through the trees. The hyena snapped for Raka's throat. Raka thrust with a powerful, instinctive swipe that tore fur and drew blood. Another hyena circled for the flank. But Chihiro thundered forward, slamming his fists into the earth so hard the ground shook. The silverback is not prey. A silverback is force. Together, predator and primate drove the hyenas back. Raka's roar echoed through the forest. Not small, not juvenile, but the beginnings of something the grasslands would one day fear. The hyenas retreated, tails tucked, snarls fading into distance. Silence claimed the forest once more. The troop remained frozen, stunned by what they witnessed. The lion cub they thought they were losing had chosen them. Not by accident. Not by confusion. By choice. Raka approached Chihiro, slow and humbled. He lowered his head the way young gorillas did. A gesture of respect he had never been taught. Only felt. Chihiro placed a hand. Massive, rough, familiar. On the cub's head. Acceptance. Not of what he had been. Not of what he would become, but of what he meant now. A member. A protector. Family by bond. Not blood. Time changed them again, but gently this time. Raka no longer slept pressed against Chihiro, but near him. Just enough distance to stretch. Just enough closeness to belong. The troop adapted to his instincts, learning to read his warning signs, trusting his presence near the forest edge. Raka learned restraint, that not every chase was hunger, not every movement was threat. They existed, not as something nature designed, but as something nature allowed. And one evening, when the sun melted into the horizon, a distant roar answered Raka's quiet call, deep, familiar. Beckoning from the grassland, he turned, ears forward, body still, listening to voices that sounded like memory calling home. But he did not go, because family is not always who shares your blood. Sometimes it is who shelters your weakness, who forgives your instincts, who stands beside you when survival demands choosing sides. Raka had been born a lion. He grew as something else, something the wild may not have had a name for, but something undeniably real. Gorilla raised the orphaned lion cub, and months later, the cub did the unthinkable. He didn't hunt them. He protected them.